They told me it was a luxury restaurant. 5 stars, high salary, night shift only. I didn't ask questions. I needed the job. I was desperate, buried under a mountain of debt, with an eviction notice pinned to my door like a death sentence. The ad was cryptic, a small, elegant font on a forgotten page of the local classifieds. It promised an opportunity that sounded too good to be true, but at that point, I couldn't afford to be skeptical. I just needed a lifeline. The restaurant was called Harari. When I tried to look it up, I found nothing. No website. No social media presence. No customer reviews on any platform. It was as if it didn't exist in the digital world. A ghost. The only piece of information was an address, scribbled on a piece of paper by the person who called to offer me the interview. The voice on the phone was smooth, professional, and oddly reassuring, which made the lack of a digital footprint even stranger. It felt like an exclusive, secret club, and for some reason, Tay wanted me. The address led me to a part of the city I rarely visited, a district of silent, monolithic, corporate towers. The building was massive, a skyscraper of polished black glass that seemed to drink the moonlight. The entrance was a set of towering golden doors, intricately carved with patterns that made my head spin. There were no windows, no signs, no indication of the supposed 5-star dining experience within. It felt more like a fortress or a tomb than a restaurant. My hand trembled slightly as I pushed one of the heavy doors open. As soon as I stepped over the threshold, the golden doors clicked shut behind me. The sound was definitive, a heavy, metallic thud that echoed in the sudden silence. I hadn't touched them. They had closed on their own. The lobby was even more opulent than the exterior suggested. Marble floors stretched into the darkness, and a single, colossal chandelier cast a warm, but somehow unnerving, glow. It was utterly silent. I was the only one there. A man emerged from the shadows. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and had a smile that was just a little too perfect, a little too wide. It didn't quite reach his eyes, which were dark and empty. "Welcome to Harari," he said, his voice as smooth as it was on the phone. "We've been expecting you." He introduced himself as the manager and gestured for me to follow him. His movements were fluid, almost unnaturally graceful. He led me through a vast, cavernous dining hall. The tables were set with pristine white cloths, gleaming silverware, and crystal glasses, all waiting for guests who weren't there. We walked towards the back, to a set of swinging doors that I assumed led to the kitchen. Before we entered, he stopped and turned to face me, his perfect smile never wavering. "There's just one rule you must remember," he said, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My heart started to beat a little faster. "What rule?" I asked, my own voice sounding small in the vast space. He leaned in closer, his breath cold against my ear. "Never, under any circumstances, entered the kitchen freezer after midnight. I started my first shift that very night. The place was just as eerie as before. Completely empty. No customers. No other waiters. No chefs. Just me and the manager, who disappeared into his office shortly after I arrived, leaving me alone in the silent, sprawling restaurant. It was the strangest job I'd ever had. My duties were simple. Polish the silverware, wipe down the already spotless tables, and wait. Just wait. But I wasn't truly alone. Soon, the weirdness began. A plate on a distant table would slowly slide a few inches to the left, as if pushed by an unseen hand. A wine glass on the bar would fill itself with red wine, the liquid pouring from thin air. I would hear footsteps echoing from the corridor behind me, quick and hurried. But whenever I spun around, heart pounding in my chest, there was no one there. The air would grow cold, and I'd catch fleeting movements in my peripheral vision, a shadow darting past a doorway, a reflection in a glass that wasn't my own. I tried to rationalize it. The building was old. Maybe it was just settling. The air conditioning was probably faulty, but I knew I was lying to myself. The clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight, each second stretching into an eternity. The atmosphere grew heavier, more oppressive. It felt like the entire building was holding its breath, waiting. At exactly 12:01 a.m., the grand chandelier above the dining hall flickered violently. Then, a new sound cut through the silence. It came from the kitchen. It was a knock. A slow, polite, rhythmic knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the freezer. The big, stainless steel, walk-in freezer door. The one the manager had warned me about. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen in place, listening. Knock, knock. It was persistent. Come. Who could possibly be in there? Was it another employee? Had they been locked in by accident? My mind raced torn between the manager's chilling warning and the basic human instinct to help someone in trouble. I told myself to ignore it. It's a prank. It's part of the building. It's anything but a person. But then, a voice spoke from the other side of the door, and it shattered my resolve. It was a muffled voice, faint and desperate, but it was unmistakably human, and it said my name. It whispered my name, drawn out and pleading. How could it know my name? That was it. The rule, the manager, the strange occurrences, none of it mattered anymore. Someone was in there, and they knew who I was. I rushed into the kitchen, my shoes squeaking on the pristine tiles. My hand hesitated for a second over the heavy latch on the freezer door. A deep, primal fear screamed at me to run, to get out of this place and never look back. But the voice called my name again, this time with a sob. I took a deep breath, and I pulled the handle. The heavy door swung open with a hiss of cold air. The sight that greeted me was not what I expected. There was no food, no boxers of frozen meat or vegetables. The inside of the freezer was arranged like a small, private dining room. There were elegant chairs, small, round tables covered in white cloths, and there were people. They were sitting upright in the chairs, dressed in fine evening wear, frozen solid. Their faces were locked in expressions of pure terror, mouths wide open in silent screams that would never be heard. Their eyes, wide and crystalline with ice, were all staring directly at the door, staring directly at me. I stumbled back, a strangled cry caught in my throat. Before I could turn and run, the freezer door slammed shut behind me with a deafening boom. I was plunged into absolute, frigid darkness. Panic seized me. I threw myself against the door, pounding on the cold steel, screaming for help. And then I heard the manager's voice. It wasn't coming from inside the freezer with me. It was echoing from the other side, calm and chillingly cheerful. "We do apologize for the inconvenience," he said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "But every restaurant needs a fresh supply of staff, and our guests are always so very hungry." The lights in the freezer went out, swallowing me in a thick, suffocating blackness. The temperature dropped instantly, a biting cold that sank into my bones. My breath plumed in front of my face, and my fingers started to go numb. And then, the knocking started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from inside. This time, it was slow and polite, and it was coming from right outside the freezer door. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was waiting to be let in. Or, I realized with a final, soul-shattering wave of terror, something was waiting to let me out.